Episode 6, Europe's Fury, the Third Crusade. The year is 1189 and across Europe, a holy fire is rekindled after hearing the tragic news of Jerusalem's fall. Will England's young king live up to his Lionheart reputation? And can anyone stand against the might of Saladin? All that and more on this episode of Kingdom of Heaven. Last time on Kingdom of Heaven, after enduring bitter fighting among themselves, the Crusader army was finally able to breach the walls of Jerusalem. But it wasn't long before Saladin's elite troops made them pay dearly for their victory, as our hero Balian, along with his friends and comrades, held on desperately to the Tower of David. The castle fell around them and Saladin granted them safe passage out of the city. With hearts heavy and knowing his son had died in the siege, Guy of Lusignan surrendered the city. Soon, the Muslim leader Saladin was proclaimed Sultan of Egypt and Syria and made plans to push north to recapture Tyre, which was still held by the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem. Meanwhile, back in Europe, the news of Jerusalem's fall ignited fury across the continent. Pope Urban III, clutching a Crusader cross, rallied the Christian world, proclaiming a new crusade to reclaim the Holy City. In England, the formidable King Richard, soon to be known as the Lionheart, sharpened his magnificent sword in a medieval royal hall. While many of his nobles thought the call to arms an inconvenient distraction from their own affairs, Richard was preparing for battle. "I shall go to the aid of the Lord and the Holy Church," he vowed, "and there I shall hear the roar of England." In Jerusalem, Saladin and his spiritual guide, Imam al-Faqih, discussed the impending war. Saladin's brother and vizier, Al-Adil, brought in reports about the approaching Crusader fleet at Acre. "All the coastal cities must prepare," Saladin commanded. "Strengthen your defenses and await orders, from Tiberias in the north to Jaffa and Gaza in the south." Messengers sped along mountain trails and coastal roads delivering urgent instructions. "Tell him, if they wish to fight, we will fight them," Saladin said to his men. "But do not let compassion hinder you from doing what must be done. For God's sake, show no mercy to those who show none." So saying, Saladin left for Cairo and his men began the daunting task of reinforcing so many cities at once. It wasn't long before Saladin received word that the port of Acre was swarming with Crusaders. Meanwhile, in England, Richard was preparing for war. He summoned barons to a council and divided the realm into 3 administrative regions, each under the control of a trusted noble, leaving him free to raise an army without interference. Across Western Europe, massive preparations were underway. Knights swore their vows, ships were built, and vast armies mobilized, all driven by the fervor of the Third Crusade. In France, Philip II, known as Philip Augustus, assembled a huge force, taking advantage of the opportunity to expand his own lands at the expense of the English. In Germany, Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa led his forces east toward the Holy Land, but during a river crossing, his heavy-laden troops broke through the thin ice of the Salmon River and drowned, ending the emperor's hopes of reaching the Levant alive. In the meantime, Richard the Lionheart, leading an army of 80,000 men, most of them mounted soldiers, along with 12,000 foot soldiers, arrived at the port of Acre and set up camp. Soon enough, he was greeted by fellow European monarchs, King Philip of France and King Guy of Lusignan of Jerusalem, who begged Richard to take the throne of Jerusalem. "No man alive could refuse the call of arms against the infidel," Richard said. Now, despite their differences, they realized that they needed to work together to have any hope of success. Inside the Crusader camp, tensions arose between the European monarchs. Some argued for parley, others wanted to rush to battle. King Richard, however, insisted on crushing Saladin's will before a single sword was lifted. "We should attack him before he can gather his strength," Richard said. "He'll be ready for us if we delay." But first, the Crusader leaders needed to lay siege to Acre, which was still occupied by Saladin's forces. Richard, eager to prove himself, impatiently demanded the city's surrender. When the order came to begin the assault, he led the charge, shouting, "For God and for England." However, they were forced to pull back when Saladin's archers inflicted heavy casualties on their infantry. Day after day, the Crusaders assaulted the city walls only to be beaten back by Saladin's disciplined troops. In the meantime, back in Jerusalem, Saladin took Richard's boastful messages with amusement. To test the Crusaders' strength, he sent them a message demanding that they surrender or face siege. Richard responded defiantly, "Your messenger has our answer," he told them. "Go tell your sultan that if he wishes to conquer Acre, he must do so by force." But Saladin knew Richard's true power lay in his determination to capture Jerusalem itself, so he devised a plan to lure the Crusaders further north, hoping to draw them into a decisive engagement. He dispatched another messenger to Richard, challenging him to meet in parley at an abandoned caravanserai near the road between Jerusalem and Gaza. Unwilling to miss an opportunity to gain intelligence on his enemy, Richard accepted, sending a knight with 5 squires and a herald. Saladin met the party with only 2 attendants and exchanged greetings and pleasantries. Before getting down to business, he offered Richard a chance to avoid bloodshed and make peace. "You claim that God gave you the right to possess Jerusalem," Saladin said, "but your people have committed great sins in seizing it. The world condemns you." He then offered Richard a choice: return to Europe and keep what Crusader holdings in the Holy Land remained, or stay and risk total defeat. When Richard rejected the offer, Saladin knew negotiations were at an end, but before the meeting broke up, he invited the English king to visit Jerusalem. "Come and see for yourself how peaceful my rule is over there," he said. Richard agreed, and Saladin escorted them all to his palace in Jerusalem, walking ahead of them to hold court. "Have you seen anything to indicate that we are tyrants?" Saladin asked Richard after his tour. "Have you found oppression or misrule?" Richard admitted that he had found nothing but peace. With their meeting at an end, Richard and his knights returned to their camp. On the way, they made camp for the night and slept, eating and drinking well. Now, shortly after they had left, a patrol of Saladin's horsemen happened upon the camp and found it deserted. The next morning, Saladin returned to Richard's camp to find it empty. There was no sign of the Crusader army except for the fire pits and traces of their tents. Delighted by this unexpected victory, Saladin ordered his men to ride out to the hills surrounding the camp to search for signs of the Crusaders. When they found a trail, he followed it, confident that Richard had merely moved to a nearby location and would submit peacefully. But to his surprise, the track led to the port of Acre, where he saw the Crusaders loading their equipment aboard their ships. They had vanished. A Crusader messenger bearing Saladin's response finally reached Richard at sea. It read, "If you seek glory, seek it where death follows pride. I seek peace. You seek praise. I will not kneel to either." Aboard his flagship, Richard read the letter aloud to his fellow nobles. The tone of Saladin's reply surprised them all. No boastful challenge or arrogant dismissal. Rather, it was written in such a manner as to convey that Saladin truly believed his cause was just. Richard was impressed, and admiration began to grow in his heart for the Muslim ruler. As the wind filled the sails of his mighty fleet, Richard steered his ship toward the coast of Asia Minor, beginning the long journey home. But his thoughts were already on his next move. Saladin's steadfastness had ignited a burning desire in him to bring the Crusader army back together and lead them to victory. His goal was clear: get to Jerusalem and crush Saladin's forces. But the Muslim leader had proven himself to be a formidable opponent. Richard knew that he would need all the help he could get. He wrote letters to kings and princes across Europe, calling them to join him in the Third Crusade. One of his letters to the French king read, "Let us now hasten to complete what we have begun. Let us save our people, honor our order, and devote ourselves to God." Soon enough, King Philip and King Guy rode toward Richard's camp, anxious to discuss strategy with their new comrade. As the sun set over the Mediterranean, the 3 kings stood side by side on the beach, watching the waves roll in. "We are like brothers now," Richard said to Philip, "and we must act like it. Our purpose is the same: to drive out the infidels and reclaim the Holy Sepulchre." A holy war was reborn, but this time the swords were heavier, for they carried the memory of mercy. The stage was set for a grand confrontation between 2 formidable leaders, one driven by conquest, the other by principle. Which side will prevail? Join us next time as the lions clash. Thanks for watching. Check out these other videos from the series, and don't forget to subscribe to be notified when new episodes are released.